Now if we take a look at some basic rendering, what we're going to do is we're going to examine EK125201. This is our CSS font example. Now, Export Kit supports a lot of different font types. This is dependent on the actual browser itself, and we'll test this to show you. You can also load dynamic fonts, for instance, like Google Fonts, and we'll include that in a separate tutorial. But what we're going to cover are default CSS fonts, and these are supported by some browsers, not all. So if you take a look at the actual list that we have here, you'll see that these are very common fonts which are included in many programs. Now, there are also additional fonts, but this is a short list. So what we're going to do is we're going to export this and test it in each browser just to see how the browsers themselves actually handle fonts. Now, these font types, they're denoted actually by using the font name itself and depending on the actual style that you've included. This will change the font in the output. So let's just go ahead and export this. Now that our export's complete, what we want to do is basically examine how each browser renders CSS fonts. So if we take a look in Explorer, we'll see that Explorer does have support for various CSS fonts. You can note this by how the font is actually rendered, but there are a lot of fonts which will render as Arial, and you can see this here where they're all the same typeface. But if we scroll down, we'll see that Explorer does have some support, so for instance Impact, Career, and so on. Now if we take a look at Firefox, and let's just load that. You'll see now Firefox also has similar support where some fonts it will actually render as Arial, and you can note this here, but others it will actually denote them as the typeface they are, and we can just go through a few again. And let's check this out in Chrome. So you'll see that each browser will slightly render fonts differently. Now, if you want to avoid this, you can load dynamic fonts such as Google Fonts, but this is the native actual support for CSS fonts. And this does change also if you're using mobile devices. So this is just a note